Karen. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you for being so organized and pulling together that. Well, you did the Word document. I just put it in a Google Doc, but thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. I thought that might be the easiest to do. So
Yeah, that really just made it so much easier. It just kind of gave it a visual and also gave it some structure that we really, really needed.
good, good. Yeah, the ones that you posted more recently over the weekend, I didn't get to write anything. I looked at them briefly, but I didn't get to write anything about them yet.
Yeah, well, take a look when you get a chance. Some of the other ones I thought looked very much designed for more the layman
Yes,
than.
I think a lot of the checklists are like that. They're designed, I think they're designed, some of them at least, to be used by the homeowner or to be used as just like a quick screening tool to kind of start the process. They're, in my mind, they're not meant to be, really assessments that we would want to adopt, maybe a couple things from them, but
Yeah. No, I agree. I thought it was really nice to be able to look at them and see what we liked and didn't like. But
yeah.
like you said, I don't know if we really want to adopt them. The one thing that kind of like came up to me as I was reading through these evaluations, though, and thinking about it, is I want to make sure that we do. It's so hard to define the different people who would be, the different places you would use it.
Right. Right. So in thinking about designing one, I don't know if we're going to have to come to some kind of a consensus of, who is this for, or if we can make it not necessarily general enough, but broad enough that it could be used with a variety of populations. Like the one evaluation that you just more recently posted, I think it was the one that is used with the contracts with the Philadelphia company, maybe.
Yeah.
And it is definitely geared towards someone who is in a wheelchair or someone who's going to be in a wheelchair. Just kind of the way it's written and if I'm thinking of the right one, the things that is asked for in the assessment, it seems like it's definitely geared towards someone who's in a wheelchair, which is fine. And I kind of think that we could probably create one that can serve, a population of folks that are in a wheelchair and those that are ambulatory. I think if we have something that allows us to put in measurements, spaces to do measurements, and because that can be valuable for someone who's in a wheelchair or someone who is not yet, even someone who uses a walker or doesn't. So I think we just need to put the right
Although
tools.
it would be nice to be able to just shut down a piece of, like, if as you're going through the assessment, um, just say, okay, we're not going to go into this part of the assessment and just write, just be able to shut down, just use the parts that you want to use.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be great to have them available if needed, but if
Yeah.
it doesn't apply to the particular case that you're working on, then you just don't complete that part.
Now, like on that same note, do you think that, for instance, if you're doing workman's comp, there's specific things you have to have? So if you're
Right.
doing like a contract for HMOTA, I'd like to then also set it up so there's certain sections you just absolutely cannot pass by.
Mm-hmm.
If we could do that.
And maybe somehow those sections are, highlighted in some way that, I don't know, there's a key up top that says workers' comp, and those sections of the eval are highlighted as workers' comp that
Oh,
have completed. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah.
there's almost some kind of a key. One of my problems is I know nothing about an app and how difficult or not difficult it is to, include sections and then not include sections. And I have no idea if that's simple or easy or how challenging that might be.
So this is the thing, and I guess we'll explain it more as more people. For I don't know if the whole committee could make it. I see there's and I hope I say your name right, Jacinta or Jacinta Bell. And I know you're new and you're from Australia. So we'll back up real quick. We're working on developing a home modification app that we can use when we do our home evaluations that will generate a report. So it will capture all the information that we need that is pertinent to the OT home evaluation, but then spit it out in a report that is understandable and appropriate as a way to reduce the amount of time we spend in developing what we need for our customers. And so that's what we're discussing now before Rachel comes on. And hello, Margie.
Hi, sorry I'm a little late. And I have to say, I haven't had a chance to go through a lot of these evaluations, but I do want to be part of the committee, so I apologize. I've had some things going on.
No problem. Did you get the link with the evaluations that were not freeware?
I've gotten a lot of links. I haven't opened them all. I was just like looking at the Casper, but I don't.
Oh yeah, so you got the link.
I don't know. Okay, was that on the same? Okay, yeah.
So one thing Kathy and I were just talking about is how to make this work in the framework of an app and how an app works. If you look at the night evaluation, and I was just going to pull that up and I can't find the link for it now. I guess I could do it this way. If you look at the night evaluation, that one is all based on an app. I took that completely out of the app and then put it together in that evaluation because I have to enter it in those terms. But I was just speaking with, so I'm in the process of negotiating a contract with this DME company for developing the app and also working on developing contracts for home modifications on a national basis because they've got quite a few contracts, but they don't have OTs to do the work for the contracts. So we're negotiating right now and going back and forth with attorneys. And I did talk to them real quick. Here's the night evaluation about, would it be best, because I don't know how much they're going to charge us for this technology. He said it's not too hard to write into the architecture of their existing app additional things that we may need. But I thought maybe if there's a way we could, expand on what they do have and decide what we like and we don't like on this based on what we do, then that might be something we might want to do. If that made any sense whatsoever. But, please make sure you look at this night evaluations specifically because this is one that's already in an app that that we could possibly work off of. And what we think is important, what we don't think is important for this one in particular.
Do you find that in some of these evaluations, and again, I was only looking at the Casper, but it might reference the person and their deficits, but I don't see where you can say, yes, there might be an additional family member who also has other deficits, and these are the deficits of the other person. I feel like it's geared around one person with deficits, and then sometimes they'll say, oh, does anybody else live in the house?
Yeah.
But I think it's important, you might be dealing with, several different things going on for different family members.
I think we need to have that in our app because that is something we'd have to take into consideration.
Right.
So I'm just going to make some notes as we go along.
I think that's a really good point, Margie, and to me, Karen and I were talking about, the population that the evaluations would be for, and your comment about making sure to include, are there other people in the house and do they have deficits? So to me, like that just brings to my mind, so, what is the caregiver situation, and does that caregiver also have deficits? Or if this is a parent we're evaluating, like a younger person, middle-aged person who is in a wheelchair and they're a parent, do they have a child, and does that child have any deficits? Or so just kind of, I wonder if it would fit under like something called family situation or caregivers, or I'm not sure what category you would, call it, so that people would understand what you're supposed to put there. But I think it's a really valid point.
And I don't really know how apps work, of course, with evaluations necessarily, but I find when I am writing up a report, so few things really fit the mold of a checklist. Like I always like to have a comment section because I feel like there's always notes I'm making, additional notes. So I don't know if apps allow for that or not.
I think that's definitely a possibility. If so, just to use the Home for Life Design app, Carolyn Saitong's. So in her evaluation, it's app based, so you can do it on an electronic tablet, like an iPad or something. And there are check boxes in some areas, and there are drop down menus in some areas, but then there's always a section for notes. Like in every section, there's a section for notes where you can add in and just do narrative. And I think that's really important too. I think it's important to have both, because you don't want to just be writing and writing and writing. You don't want to do the whole thing narrative. So I think there's a place for check boxes and drop downs and narrative. I think you kind of need to have them all to make it less work intensive, but give you the ability to further explain when needed.
Absolutely. I think that's very valid. Yeah.
It would be nice if instead of having to type it in, it could just be voice to text, and then you could alter it later, polish it later, just because it's a lot. I've used their app several times, and it's a lot to sit there in front of the client. I text like a 50-year-old woman, I'm not fast. And so I would like it to be voice to text for those comment sections.
Yeah, I think that's great. I agree.
We do need a drawing app embedded in this somehow, or one that's at least I don't know, complementary to this. That I think that is really definitely a must. What do you guys think?
I definitely agree. I think if there's any possible way, it could just be embedded somehow in the evaluation, because as as you're going through, depending on how the evaluation is set up, like if it's room by room, then you could do, a drawing of a particular room and have it be right there embedded within the evaluation itself. I think that would be very helpful. And you could even include, measurements, some measurements that way too.
Yeah, there's this really kind of cool app that I use sometimes, and it's called Measure It. And if you take a picture like straight on of the house and you just know one measurement, whether it's a vertical or a horizontal measurement, like if you know how wide the door is, the app will then compute how far every other horizontal measurement you want to know based on, the one thing that it knows the measurement of, which is really nice when you don't quite get all the measurements. And, something like that, I think I'm going to look into how we could get that as part of it, where some of the measuring would just be part of the app.
That's really interesting. What is that called again, Karen?
It's called, I believe it's called Measure Up or Measure It.
Okay.
It's kind of an old app. I've had it for quite a while. So is there anything that, like I was looking at the Casper in particular, and I like the drawings of the different sorts of egresses. It'd be nice to be able to say, this is the egress, hit on it, and then put in the measurements as needed, or possibly, it'd be nice to take a picture in that Measure It app, and then have that just fill in all the blanks, but I don't know how easy that would be. Did anybody else have any thoughts on anything in particular they saw that they would want included from the apps we looked at?
Karen, I'm like you with the Casper. Probably my favorite part of the Casper is all of those diagrams of the egresses and the different rooms that, depending on the house that you're evaluating, with the Casper, you select the house or the egress that you're dealing with that is most represented in the Casper, and then put your measurements in. I think that's really helpful to have that visual. And if we could have something like that in the app, like you said, that we could just click on a space and then enter the measurement, I think that would be really helpful and save a lot of writing, and at the same time be very clear.
You could almost do that with bathrooms too. I know bathrooms around here are all it's always pretty much the same layout. But that's for this part of the country, I feel like. Who knows what it's like every place else.
I think, also having a section for the Casper does this, the Home for Life app does this, having a section for, the client goals, for, it's making sure that those are documented. And the Casper, another thing I like about the Casper is that it kind of prompts you to ask the client, well, I think the client and the therapist together probably make this decision about how timely is this? Is this something that needs to be done right now? Is this something that can wait for 3 months? I think that's an important aspect to it as well, because depending on the payer source, not everyone can do everything at the same time. Or make all the modifications at once.
Yeah, which makes sense because I know like a lot of times I'll do short-term recommendations and long-term recommendations. This is what you need to get into the house for the weekend. This is what you need to live there long-term.
Right. I think that's a great point. And, so many people, it is based on the time and the money they have, but it's so helpful for them to know that we're looking at the future, that we've taken these things into account, and they can make changes, on a gradual basis. And there's other changes they have to do right away.
Yeah, and hopefully it could be a money-saving thing where instead of making these changes now at this point in your disability or whatever, and then when you decide you want to do something more invasive later, hopefully you wouldn't have to change everything you had already invested in.
I think another thing, component of the evaluation that I would really like to see, and I think, Karen, you've discussed this as well, just something to help solidify in this area, is to have something that is, an outcome measure that we can collect some data from it to, determine, once the home modifications that we recommended were made, how did this improve the person's functioning and safety and, maybe quality of life, just have some way of measuring the outcome. I know, the Home for Life design app does that in one way. And I don't know if any of the other ones do that or not. I'm trying to think. I think the iHope probably does it, but that's not one that we were looking at.
Yeah, I
But
didn't
think
see that one.
it's definitely geared toward an older adult. So the focus of the iHope is very specific to that population. So I don't know that it would be all that helpful for us to look at if we're looking at kind of a broader population for this assessment.
You know what I would like to do though is I don't know, I would like to do something to support the research. So I was thinking maybe like as far as like the outcome measure, maybe we need to find some people, talk to some of the people who are doing research and have them help us build the measurements they need to collect data. I mean, I have no idea what kind of data they're looking at and what could we do to support them.
I think that's a really good idea. And Susie Stark does a lot of research in this area. Laura Gitlin is another one. Susan Santon, the one who does the
Oh yeah.
what's that? Margie, you know what I'm talking about too. Capable, yeah.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
get
So
a
I
hold
think
of them. In fact, it'd be nice if we could set it up so this app supports what Capable's doing. Just to make it easier for them. The other thing I think that's going to be important for us to analyze and make sure we get right is the workflow for going through, when you're doing the app, doing the workflow correctly. Because I know on some of the evaluations I was looking at, it would be like, this is the house, this is the person, and it was be grouped like that. But I know when I do a home evaluation, I always start with taking pictures of the whole entire house and the front egress on my way in. And so, and then, if you're just trying to follow the app and it starts with a person, I'd rather it start with the front egress as you walk up and then move on. So it's sort of more of a natural flow. So you're not jumping around trying to keep up with the app. Gonna be hello Rachel, welcome. I'll just give you a real quick update, Rachel. We're working on a app for home evaluations, so just so things are more consistent, accurate, and that and it's not so time consuming to write up the evaluations. We're starting to get national contracts, so we're sending work out to the OTs around the country based on these contracts, but we need to make sure that we are consistent. That's the only thing that's going to make it so that we'll continue to get contracts and do the best job possible. We've got a company that has offered to work with us on developing the app. So we're just trying to figure those things out real quick before our official meeting. But welcome. We're very excited you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me just, I'm going to close up this processes or the evaluation meeting real quick, and then we'll open up with the other part of the meeting. So just one quick second. For those of you on the evaluation committee, I'll send out an email tomorrow, and if anybody else would like to put in some comments on the assessment committee Google Doc, please go ahead. And then what we need to do is just decide what our next steps are. Now that we've evaluated all these different evaluations, I think it's probably identifying what we want to include in ours, and maybe contacting some of the researchers and taking a look at apps.
Karen, I just have a quick question. In the DME company that you're negotiating with, have they a specific outcome measure they want us to look at? Is there something in particular they want to see?
Basically, they don't know a whole lot about home modifications. The whole and and this kind of goes into what we're doing tonight. The problem is nobody knows what the home modification process is. It's all just too blurry. So there's no consistency. A lot of the payers don't know what to ask for or what they need. And so that's where we're going to be coming in and organizing it, because it's just too, nobody really knows what's going on right now, which is, thank God for you, Dr. Russell, as far as trying to make this more of a process and make it more clear cut, because not only do people not know what occupational therapy is, at least not in the United States the way they should, but they absolutely have no idea what process home modification should go through and who should do it. And that's part of the reason that that this group was formed, because in the United States anyway, people were looking at the builders as the leaders for home modifications, and there was not a lot of money for OT, and there's not a lot of recognition. But it's part of pulling, this is an emerging field, and pulling it together so that people do understand what it is.
Yeah, I think we've got the same problem here in the UK in terms of builders and architects doing what our role is. So I think obviously it's not just specific to the US. I think it's probably similar here, Europe, Australia.
Yeah.
So I think the work that you're doing is really important.
Yeah, I feel like if we don't pull together and make ourselves leaders, because nobody's going to give us this place at the table. We're going to have to pull up a chair and elbow our way in. But if we don't do this, then we're out of the game. Which is why, I'm so glad that you're doing the research that you are doing.
Oh, thank you. Well, hopefully it'll be of some.
Well, and maybe I would, if it's all right with you, that you just caught the end of the evaluation committee, because we are working on developing an evaluation. We've got access to technology company that's going to be developing the app for us. But, one thing, I don't know if you were part of that discussion, was how can we put together this app so it also collects the data that the occupational therapists that are doing the research, how can we collect the data you need? Whether it's
I think
pictures, what?
I think it's really interesting, and hopefully we'll talk about outcomes. I think the challenge that we have got in terms of measuring outcomes is that different audiences want different outcomes to be measured. So obviously as practitioners, we want to look at the outcomes in terms of probably the improvement of people's health and well-being, occupational performance and participation. Commissioners or whoever is buying in your service is probably interested in other metrics that that outcome measures that we're more familiar with isn't necessarily what they're wanting, but then it's about advising commissioners and people who buy our service actually what do they want measuring. So I think it's quite challenging in terms of outcome measures and measuring, why you're measuring. So yeah, I think it's really challenging, and I think it's about just being aware of what outcome measures are out there, knowing what they do measure, and then almost kind of having a basket of outcome measures that you can, depending on what audience that you're looking at targeting.
Good point. I would imagine most of it would be, and we've already got some research about, lowering health care costs. Readmissions is a big thing here in the United States. Caregiver hours.
Yeah. But then it's about linking it up to, is it the occupational therapist making that difference, which we know it is, but there's very little research that goes on in terms of if you look at occupational therapy in the body of evidence, and you think about other areas of occupational therapy research, there's very little done in this field. Obviously, you guys have got Susie Stark over there. You've got Laura Gitlin. In the UK, we are just about getting a few more researchers interested, but for a long time we really only had Frances Haywood. I don't know if any of you've come across Frances Haywood's work. In Australia now, you've got people like Tammy Aplin, Liz Ainsworth, that's doing a bit of research, and obviously you've got the guys in Sweden, Susan Urson and her colleagues at Lund University. But in terms of a body of evidence, it's not huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can change that. I know in the United States they're making it so you have to have a doctorate in order to practice occupational therapy. So I would assume there's going to be more and more people looking for research projects.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for coming, and thanks for jumping into that conversation, Rachel.